Welcome to this week's OK at Work with myself, Sarah Sawyer, and my colleague, Russell Berger, both employment attorneys with Offit Kurman. And this week we are discussing the Biden administration's reversal of a diversity training ban that restricted the federal government and its contractors from using curriculum that examined systematic racism, white privilege, and other race and gender bias issues. So during the Trump administration, they put this diversity training ban in place, and now we're a couple weeks into, I think a couple weeks, maybe even less than that, into the Biden administration, and he has, gotten rid of that ban and has, reaffirmed the federal government's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, what does that mean for employers, Russell?
Yeah, so, again, as you mentioned, the restriction only applied to federal government employers, which, we're not, there isn't really our audience for this, as well as federal government contractors. And so, what the proposed Trump regulation said was, if in every contract we're going to, put a stipulation in place that says you're not going to do, when you should do harassment training, but when you do it, you're not going to do, certain types of diversity training that would make people feel uncomfortable, or I believe the phrasing in the executive order was that would be considered to be un-American. So that was the proposed language. It never actually went into effect because it was again something that came in late in President Trump's term. But so what ended up happening is the executive order was signed. It was challenged in court. There were delays. It never got implemented. So now what President Biden has done is just kind of erased it and wiped it off the books.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing a trend of that so far in the last couple of weeks, and some changes. But I think this brings up an interesting point as far as harassment training just for employers in general, and the importance of it. So I know it's January 28th while we're recording this, so the start of the year, and most employers are still remote, and probably looking at the year ahead and what they should be doing from an employment standpoint. And I definitely have been talking with my clients about making sure that even though they're probably going to be remote for a lot longer than expected, and still a good chunk of this year, to still be thinking about these issues and these types of trainings, and making sure that they're figuring out a way to do them virtually, because not being in the office is not really a good. It's not only not really a good reason, it's not a good reason to not do these types of trainings and make sure that you're bringing them to your employees at home.
Right. And while, having fewer people in the office reduces the risk of certain types of harassment, it probably increases the risk of other types of harassment. And certainly in kind of the modern world, we're already headed in this direction with, virtual harassment, text messages, social media, emails, electronic harassment. And that's something that's, I think, probably growing in prevalence, given that people are spending more time in front of their computers and with their phone sitting out on their desk. So there's more opportunity for that type of harassment to take place in kind of this remote working world.
And I would say that that's also a good point about being remote and having access, right? So you're on. Not only is there more opportunity potentially because there's less of a work and home divide, so now work is in people's homes, so that that's going to kind of change the dynamic of what harassment looks like, but also your reporting procedures, right? So a lot of times when someone felt uncomfortable with something, they could walk next door to HR or to their manager and very easily, kind of as part of a conversation, report something. Or, that's another thing to look at, I think, is what are your reporting procedures? Do they make sense in the virtual world? Are the people that are the point of contact for these issues still the proper points of contact? Does the language need to be adjusted at all in your policy to make sure that you're making it easy for people now that we're not in offices? So.
Yeah, and along those lines, I mean, harassment training is something that we would recommend. It's like going to the doctor for your checkup. Like, this is something that should be done on an annual basis. and it's always a good reminder. It's an important reminder. It's obviously an important issue, and as a business owner, it creates exposure and liability. If you're not doing the training, and certainly if you have issues. So we would always generally recommend that. And usually the start of the year is a good time to check that box. But it's, and I shouldn't say check that box. I think it's a little bit more than that, because it is substantive and it is important. But this year, I think, as we've been saying, like there's some nuance to it, and there's ways to do it a little bit differently. And I know, like when we work with clients, we try to do it a little bit differently each year. We don't want to just do the same presentation year after year. And I think now there's new points, new considerations to raise, kind of within the broader framework, that we would always cover, which is, this is what harassment is. This is what discrimination in the workplace looks like. You should, obviously it's prohibited. Here's what you should do if it's happening. Here's who you should report to. If you're a manager, here's how you should handle it. But a lot of the training and what I think we would be doing, what we have been doing this year, is helping to identify for businesses and the managers who are on the front lines. When should the alarm go off? What new situations should trigger me to call HR or to call the CEO and get somebody else involved?
Yeah, and I think in closing, that kind of an example of that too is the ever-changing nature of these things and why it's important to do this yearly as well as something that's been in the news a lot, both as Biden has taken office and then also with Supreme Court decisions last year, is adding of gender identity, to protections. So there's ever evolving things in this realm as well. So really an area to pay attention to and take a look at, as you mentioned, on an annual basis. So and hopefully go above and beyond checking that box, but also checking that box. So
Right.
well, awesome. Well, thanks, Russell, and we'll see everybody next time.
Yep. Thanks, Sarah.